Our final question this week is from Dennis. And Dennis asks, are there any right-wing leaders around the world that you admire?
Good question. I suppose it has to be current living. I can't have Lee Kuan-yew.
No, if Dennis were asking us for historical figures we admired, then we might be here
for
all week. So he is, I think, restricting us to currently active living leaders.
Yeah. Yes. Okay, so there's Central South America. There are a couple who I admire very much. I know that our countries are not exactly the same, so it's not potentially the exact template that we might follow, but I think Nayib Bukele, president of El Salvador, achieved an astonishing feat in actually managing to break up the drug cartels, something that people felt was impossible. And he did this by locking up the wrong uns. Who knew that you can just lock people up and crime stops? Astonishing. What will they think of next? Considering where El Salvador was just a few years ago, one of the most violent countries in the region, and now one of the safest, it just proves in the same way that I think similar to Lee Kuan-yew that you can bring a kind of civilizational change by following clear principles and probably ignoring some of your naysayers and just getting on with it. Javier Milei, again, wouldn't do everything exactly as he does, but to have a budget surplus in Argentina, again, an extraordinary feat that the naysayers probably didn't think would happen. It was predicted to be economic catastrophe. So I think maximum credit to those two. Otherwise, he's not a leader, unfortunately, because Donald Trump shafted him last year before the federal elections. But I'm a big admirer of Pierre Poilievre, the leader of the Canadian Conservatives. He's really fascinating as a politician, and I suppose it's something that the Conservative Party in Britain could only dream of. But I watched him speak earlier this week, and it's really interesting how he is pro-capitalism, but also in a way quite populist and very the working class and working people. He tells a story which I don't see anyone really in Britain even attempting to do, about how sometimes it's the big state, but also the crony capitalists and the vested interests can squash the interests of the ordinary person. So he's managed to achieve this, and he has a lot more support than, as I say, the Conservative Party in Britain could only dream of. And most intriguingly of all, he has a huge following amongst younger voters in particular, because he's explained how vested interests will, for example, prevent them from achieving what they want to. So NIMBYs stop you from having your home. Governments printing too much money damages the value of the money in your pocket, inflation. And so he's really good at explaining how these things can work. And I don't agree with everything he says, but I think he's very good at persuading and telling a compelling story, which I feel some politicians on this side of the pond have basically stopped trying to do, and just going with what does the latest focus group or poll say, how do we copy that?
Pierre Poilievre has been in the UK this week, and he spoke at the Centre for Policy Studies. It gave Margaret Thatcher a memorial lecture. I didn't see it, but I did read it, and I agree with you. It was very impressive. And he's impressive on the stump, and the pitch that he's made, pro-worker, anti-vested interests, strongly pro-free market, and strongly pro-British, I find faultless. So I certainly think he's great. I mean, I think that you are right that he lost the elections in Canada, which he was apparently nailed on to win, because the Trump intervention came at just the wrong time for him and just the right time for Mark Carney.
Yes. And Trudeau left at the right time as well. But
exactly,
he might, I think, were it not for Trump, he might still have edged it.
Oh yeah, no, and I think there's every chance. I mean, you never underestimate Mark Carney, but I think that the Liberals in Canada have been in power for quite some time now. So I think Poilievre has the chance of potentially winning the next election. Just away from the Anglosphere for a second, and away from the Americas for a second, in Europe, there are certain political figures whom I admire, some currently leaders, some not yet. So I'm a big fan of Giorgia Meloni. I love her. I think she is wonderful. I think that what she's done in Italy, again, robustly right-wing on borders and crime, pro-Christian civilization, supportive of Ukraine against Russia, fan of both Roger Scruton and J.R.R. Tolkien.
Yeah.
I think she's great. Italy's economy seems to be doing very well. We touched on Dubai as a source of competition for London, but actually Milan is proving an attractive place for tax exiles as well.
Particularly after the inheritance tax changes that Reeves brought in.
Exactly. There's someone who I think our listeners probably won't have heard of, or they may have done, who I also think is brilliant, equally, if not more controversial, who is a woman called Sarah Knafo, Knafo, who is running to be mayor of Paris at the moment. She is clear, robust, culturally conservative, pro-free market. And, if I were in France, I would normally vote default for the Gaullist or Republican candidate. But as the candidate for mayor of Paris, I do recommend that people have a look at what she's saying. I think she's great. Two other male European politicians who I like, also in France, Bruno Retailleau, who was the interior minister. He's a proper Gaullist. He's also a very keen countryman. If you can imagine, as it were, a French Charles Moore.
It's impossible to imagine such a thing. It does not compute.
Then that's Bruno Retailleau. And then in Germany, a guy called Jens Spahn, who was their health minister. He's a CDU figure, but he's one of the few CDU figures who unambiguously says not that they're a Christian Democrat, but that they're a conservative. And I think they're all great. But I also have one other right-wing leader whom I admire, who, if you can guess, Maddie, this will guarantee that I will alienate many of our listeners and readers.
Oh, okay. Alienate many of our listeners. So I'm looking for a right-wing leader that will be widely disliked by...
A right-wing leader who is hugely controversial. Even when people say that they
Trump.
admire his country, they often pause and say, but not his government.
It's not Trump, is it?
Nope. Bibi Netanyahu.
Oh.
So the standard thing amongst people who are supportive of Israel is to say, I support Israel, but not the Israeli government. I totally understand that.
I see your point.
A very important distinction to draw. However, it is so fashionable to hate Bibi Netanyahu. All I would say is, in a nutshell, after October the 7th, he essentially drew the teeth from Hamas, defanged Hezbollah. He was responsible for ensuring that Iran's nuclear arsenal was targeted and set back.
Killed many civilians.
He is certainly not flawless, but I think if you consider the strategic position that Israel was in and the strategic position it's now in, and alongside that, Israel's economy continues to be resilient and its society continues to be free. And I know that there will be furious denunciation, but I am a great fan of the babysitter.
Oh my God. He shouldn't have, too many people have died for him to have that cute nickname.
It is a name that he had from a particular advert that they had in Israel, where you have a couple who are worrying about who will keep their family safe.
Oh, God.
And he's the guy who is presented. What? And the key thing is, I remember this conversation with an American in the context of Trump, which is when choosing a president, I don't want a therapist, I want a bodyguard. The point being that people, certainly his supporters felt, and he won that election, that you could make an argument about the security provided in a, for want of a better word, homespun way. From my point of view, the single most important thing, and here there's a contrast, of course, with Starmer, that a prime minister can do is to make people in that country feel safe and secure because of the solidity of his leadership. And again, one of the things I would say about Israel, one can argue that more and more countries will feel this way, is that it is better, Machiavelli style, to be feared than loved. And if you're in a rough neighborhood, that sometimes means some very, very difficult decisions. It was interesting this week that Macron said, in order for France to be safe, France has to be strong.
Yes.
And for order for France to be strong, it has to be feared. And he was saying this as he was celebrating, if that's the right word, certainly marking the increased investment that France is making, not only in its independent nuclear deterrent, but in its army overall. And as has been remarked on, France has an aircraft carrier in the Mediterranean and several other vessels, while our Type 45 destroyer is still in port in Portsmouth.
Oh my God. We can't defend our own airbase.
Quite.
It's just so the humiliation and also the projection of confidence, because
yes.
It's really fascinating. the PR, I mean, not only I think is France in a much better strategic position and has been for basically the entire post-war period, I would say. It's also the comms around what's going on is so interesting. You know, there's been these sort of PR'd photos of Macron flying in a jet surrounded by other
Oh, yes.
a kind of flight flotilla, and the marking of the submarine singing La Marseillaise and all of this stuff. And meanwhile, we've had our Prime Minister just put out a video that looks a bit like a kind of cut scene from The Office or something, where he's speaking to various people over Zoom, always clutching his folder very close to his chest and consulting his notes and saying, hello, Friedrich, hello, Emmanuel.
Exactly.
You know, there's no sense of leadership at all. It's just waiting for someone else to speak to him and constantly deferring to other better leaders.
There are two juxtaposed images of this week, which are national images. One is of Macron leading French civilians and military in a chorus of the Marseillaise in the shipyard where the nuclear submarine is being inaugurated. And the contrast is with British parliamentarians practicing their cha-cha-cha in a Strictly Come Dancing dance-a-thon in Portcullis House. Now, some people have looked at those two contrasting images, and some people have said, oh, you know, what's wrong with people showing a certain degree of being game in Britain? But I do think that it probably is unfair. But those two images, I suppose if you're a certain sort of person, you can say one of them shows the certain blithe and good-natured maintenance of a British sense of fun versus the pomposity of the French. But actually, I think what it does show at a moment of crisis is a robust patriotism on the part of the French and an increased frivolity on our part.
It's a terrible combination that we always have of a kind of horrible twee veneer mixed with national decline. And I think that Strictly video summed it up better than almost anything I can think of.
Yes. So on this occasion, I fear, it's Britain #decline and France #Vive la République.